I got home earlier than usual that evening, and the air outside felt thick with humidity. It was a clear sign that a storm was on its way, but the quiet inside the house was what really struck me. There was no sound of Emily moving around downstairs like usual. It was too quiet. My mind was still a jumble from a long day filled with deadlines, meetings, and nonstop tasks. All I wanted was to get through the door, crack open a cold beer, and plop down on the couch, maybe get a moment of peace before Emily would start talking about her day. But as soon as I stepped inside, something felt wrong. It wasn't obvious at first, just a subtle shift in the atmosphere. The air felt heavier, almost suffocating. It pressed in on me as I stood in the entryway, trying to figure out what had changed. There was no TV on in the background, no clinking dishes in the sink, and no footsteps coming to greet me. It was just silence. I started heading up the stairs, even though I couldn't quite explain why. Maybe it was instinct, maybe a gut feeling. Whatever it was, something deep inside me pushed me to follow the stillness. When I reached the top of the stairs, I slowed down, trying to make as little noise as possible. And then I heard it, an unmistakable sound, a muffled groan, soft but clear enough to stop me dead in my tracks. I didn't want to believe it. I fought against the gut-wrenching feeling telling me what was happening. For a moment, I was stuck between disbelief and fury. My heart pounded in my chest, threatening to burst out of my ribs, but I stayed frozen. Then it came again, louder this time, followed by movement. It was coming from the bedroom, our bedroom. My feet carried me closer before I even realized what I was doing. The carpet muffled my steps as I reached the door, which was cracked just enough for me to catch a glimpse in the mirror on the opposite wall. And there they were, together, on the bed I'd shared with Emily for years. She was under him, her face flushed, lost in whatever moment they were sharing, not even aware I was standing there. And he, Ryan, my best friend, was hovering over her, pressing into her in a way that made my stomach churn. The betrayal hit me like a gut punch, raw and crushing. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. I didn't even know what I was supposed to do. I just stood there, paralyzed, watching. Every part of me screamed to rush in, to tear them apart, to make them feel the weight of their treachery. In that moment, I wanted to, but I didn't. My fists clenched so tight my knuckles were white, but I resisted. I wanted to kick down the door, knock Ryan to the ground, and shout at Emily, demanding an explanation. How could she throw away everything we'd built for some fleeting moment of cheap pleasure with the one person I once trusted as a brother? But no, I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing me break. Instead, I slowly backed away, retreating down the stairs as quietly as I had arrived. Each step felt heavier than the last, my mind swirling with rage and betrayal and something colder, something calculated. I wasn't going to confront them. Not yet. Not like this. I had something far better planned. Once I reached the bottom of the stairs, I slipped out the front door, making sure it was quiet behind me. The night had fallen, and the rain started coming down in soft, steady drops. But I barely noticed. My mind was elsewhere as I stumbled toward my car, each breath filled with anger. Once behind the wheel, I gripped the steering wheel so hard I thought it might snap. The image of them together burned in my mind, her face filled with pleasure, his body over hers like he belonged there. Betrayal didn't just break trust. It destroyed it completely, leaving nothing but emptiness where love used to live. But I wasn't about to let this play out in some impulsive rage. No, I was going to let them think they got away with it. Emily, sweet, deceitful Emily, would keep pretending. She'd continue being the devoted wife, cooking me dinners, kissing me goodnight, all while sneaking off to be with him. Ryan would act like nothing had changed, like he wasn't sleeping with the one person he should never have touched. They thought they were clever, hiding their affair from me, but I was about to show them what real cleverness looked like. My plan formed slowly, but with a clear focus. I wasn't just going to expose them. I was going to dismantle their lives, piece by piece. Take away everything that mattered to them. The best part? They wouldn't even see it coming. By the time they figured out what I'd done, it would be too late. And Ryan? He had no idea how personal this was going to get. He loved his wife, Sophia, like a trophy, proud of their little family. Well, if he wanted to destroy mine, then it was only fair I return the favor. I'd take Sophia from him. Not just take her away, but make her mine, just like he'd done with Emily. And unlike him, I wouldn't rush it. This wasn't about a cheap affair. It was about power, about control, revenge. I started the car, the engine roaring to life as the rain picked up. My grip on the wheel loosened, a cold smile creeping onto my face. This wasn't the end of my marriage. It was just the beginning of their downfall, and I was going to savor every moment of it. That night, I drove aimlessly through the rain-soaked streets, letting the rhythmic sound of the rain on the windshield drown out the storm brewing inside me. My anger still simmered, but it was no longer raw. It had turned colder, sharper. The shock of catching Emily and Ryan together faded, replaced by a calm, methodical resolve. Revenge. Real revenge couldn't be rushed. It wasn't something to be done in a fit of rage that would only make me look like the fool they thought I was. No, I wanted to tear them down piece by piece, so when they finally understood what had happened, they'd be standing among the wreckage of their own lives. To do that, I had to start with Ryan. I parked in the shadows, the light rain tapping on the car as I sat there, my mind racing like a runaway train. Ryan had always been so full of himself, acting like he could take anything that was mine without facing any consequences. What he didn't realize was how exposed he truly was. He thought I was just some easygoing pushover, but he didn't know how much I understood about his life, his weaknesses. And Sophia. Sophia was the key to everything. Ryan and Sophia had been together forever, living that picture-perfect suburban life. House, kids, white picket fence. He loved flaunting his ideal life, constantly bragging about his accomplishments. But I knew the best way to hit him where it hurt was by taking away what mattered most to him. But this wasn't going to be some petty affair where I just seduce her and then brag about it. No, it needed to be deeper, more meaningful. I didn't just want to sleep with Sophia. I wanted to take her from him in a way that would truly hurt. I wanted to make her fall for me, make her question everything she thought she knew about Ryan. In the end, I wanted her to choose me, not out of some fleeting desire, but from a place of real affection and belief. And when that moment came, I would make sure Ryan saw it all unfold. I would watch as everything he held dear collapsed right in front of him. What made my plan so satisfying was how effortless it would be. I knew Sophia's insecurities, her fears, her longings. She wasn't like Emily. Sophia was quieter, more thoughtful, with a delicate side Ryan had never truly appreciated. To him, she was just another accessory to show off, something to parade at family gatherings or brag about to friends. But I saw the cracks long before any of this happened. I'd noticed her vulnerability, and now I was ready to use it. As I glanced at my phone, I considered if tonight was the night to make my first move. But no, patience was key. I couldn't rush in too soon. I had to lay the groundwork carefully. So I drove home, slipping back into my role as the unsuspecting husband. Emily had no idea that I knew everything. That was my biggest advantage. As I entered the house, I could hear Emily humming upstairs, probably getting ready for bed. Each note seemed to echo her betrayal. I kept my face neutral as I moved through the kitchen. She appeared at the bottom of the stairs, wearing one of my old, worn-out t-shirts, the kind she used to love sleeping in. It used to be cute, but now it felt like a cruel joke. "You're home late," she said casually, filling a glass of water. Her tone was so nonchalant, as if nothing had happened, as if she hadn't just betrayed me in our own bed. The audacity was almost impressive. "Yeah," I replied, keeping my voice level. "Got caught up at work." She came over and kissed my cheek, acting like everything was fine. "I missed you today." I gave her a cold smile, one that had become my mask. "I missed you too." The lies slipped out of my mouth so easily now, like second nature. As she turned to head back upstairs, I watched her go, wondering how long she thought she could keep pretending. But I wasn't ready to confront her yet. Not until my plan was fully in motion. She and Ryan probably thought they were safe, that they could carry on their affair without me ever finding out. Little did they know, the ground beneath them was already shifting. The next day, I started putting my plan into action. I reached out to Sophia, pretending it was just a casual check-in, something a friend would do. We'd known each other for years, so sending a quick message to catch up wouldn't raise any suspicions. I asked how she was doing, and if she wanted to meet for coffee. She responded almost immediately, probably glad for a distraction from whatever empty relationship she had left with Ryan. A few days later, we arranged to meet at a cafe. It wasn't unusual. Ryan and I were close, and we'd spent plenty of time together as couples over the years. But this time was different. This was part of my plan. We met at a quiet cafe in town, one of those places where no one pays much attention to who sits where. Sophia looked worn out, like the weight of the world was on her shoulders. She smiled when she saw me, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "Thanks for meeting me," I said, keeping my tone light and friendly. "It's been a while." "Yeah," she replied softly, her voice strained. "Things have been busy." I didn't need her to explain. I knew exactly what she meant. Ryan, the so-called perfect husband, was far from it. I encouraged her to talk, asking about the kids, her art studio, all while studying her closely, watching every change in her expression and every flicker of doubt that crossed her face. Then the conversation took a more personal turn, and I felt I had her exactly where I wanted her. "I've been struggling with everything," she admitted, her eyes dropping to the table. "It feels like Ryan and I are drifting apart, like we're just not connecting anymore." I leaned in slightly, keeping my voice low, full of concern. "I'm sorry to hear that, Sophia. You deserve so much better." Her eyes met mine, searching for something. Validation, maybe. I gave it to her. "You've always been such a good friend," she said, relief obvious in her voice. "I don't know what I'd do without people like you." I smiled warmly, but it was entirely fake. "You're not alone. I'm always here if you need someone to talk to." She smiled back, but it was a sad one. A smile that belonged to someone starting to realize her perfect life wasn't as perfect as she believed. And that was exactly what I wanted. To make her doubt everything she thought she knew. That was the goal. As I left the cafe, a surge of triumph washed over me. Everything was falling into place. One calculated move after another. Ryan had no idea that the woman he was betraying me with was about to be the one to tear his world apart. I walked back to my car, the rain softly falling around me, the perfect reflection of the storm brewing inside. This was only the beginning. The day after meeting with Sophia, I could feel an exhilarating thrill simmering just below the calm exterior I was presenting to the world. The slow burn of revenge had already begun, and there was no turning back now. Ryan was still unaware of the trap closing around him, while Sophia was starting to see me in a new light. More than just her husband's friend. It was subtle, and that was exactly how I wanted it. She needed to trust me, to see me as someone who understood her in ways Ryan never could. Meanwhile, Emily continued to play her part, blissfully ignorant of the changes happening around her. She bombarded me with the usual mind-numbing texts about grocery lists or weekend plans, thinking everything was fine. She had no idea that I saw through her act. She thought I was clueless, unaware of the twisted game she and Ryan were playing. But soon, she'd realize just how wrong she was. It was a Thursday evening, about a week after my coffee with Sophia, when I decided it was time to take things to the next level. I knew Ryan would be stuck at work late, tangled up in a big project he'd mentioned. It was the perfect cover for his extracurricular activities. But tonight, it wasn't Emily I was focused on. It was Sophia. I made my way to their house, my excuse already in place. I would drop by unannounced, playing the concerned friend. Sophia had confided in me during our last conversation, expressing feelings of neglect. I knew she would appreciate the visit, even welcome the distraction. As I pulled up to their two-story home, the rain picked up, casting a gentle haze over the street. The lights inside glowed warmly, casting a soft light on the wet pavement. I caught a glimpse of the TV flickering in the window, a cozy scene playing out in their living room. It all seemed so easy. I knocked on the door, making sure my demeanor was relaxed and unhurried. A moment later, Sophia answered. Surprise flickered in her eyes. "Oh, hey," she said, stepping aside to let me in. "I didn't expect to see you." Her tone was genuine, her surprise clear. I smiled casually, shaking off the rain from my jacket. "Yeah, I thought I'd drop by. Just happened to be in the neighborhood," I said, a complete lie. I hadn't been anywhere near their neighborhood, but she didn't seem to mind. She looked pleased to see me. "Ryan isn't home," she said, a hint of apology in her voice. I know, I replied, my tone smooth and relaxed. I'm here for you. The words caught her off guard. I saw the flash of uncertainty in her eyes, but she quickly recovered, offering a smile as she led me into the living room. Can I get you something to drink? She asked, her voice light, but with a note of nervousness. Wine would be great, I said, settling into the couch. I could hear the clink of glasses and the soft hum of the refrigerator as she went to get it. When she returned, she handed me a glass of red and took a seat next to me, closer than usual. How are you holding up? I asked, keeping my voice low and warm, perfecting the image of concern. Sophia sighed, staring into her glass. It's been tough, she admitted. Ryan has been so distant. I don't know. Sometimes it feels like he doesn't care at all. I nodded, feigning sympathy. You're not wrong to feel that way, I said, careful to keep my tone supportive. You know how Ryan can be. He often fails to appreciate what he has. She looked up at me, her eyes searching for reassurance. You've always been so good to us, she said quietly. I honestly don't know what I'd do without friends like you. I let her words linger, feeling their weight. Then I reached over and placed my hand gently on her knee. You deserve more than this, Sophia, I whispered, my voice soft, sincere. You deserve someone who truly values you. Her breath caught, and for a moment, she didn't pull away. Instead, she sat there, her gaze locked on mine, the uncertainty in her eyes slowly shifting to something deeper. The air between us thickened, charged with tension, as the space between us seemed to shrink. I don't know what to do, she murmured, her voice trembling slightly. I do, I said, leaning in just enough to make my intentions clear, but not crossing the line just yet. You deserve better than what Ryan gives you, and I think you know that deep down. Her gaze fell to where my hand rested on her knee, and I could see the internal struggle. She was caught between her loyalty to her husband and the undeniable pull of something she craved, something Ryan had failed to provide. I shouldn't. She started. I interrupted her gently, my voice soft and coaxing. I'm not asking for anything, Sophia. I'm simply speaking the truth. She hesitated, her breath shallow. For a moment, I feared she might pull away. But then, slowly, almost imperceptibly, she leaned in closer. Her lips parted slightly, her eyes fluttering shut. It would have been so easy to kiss her then, to close the gap, to take that final step. But no, not yet. This wasn't about rushing things. It was about making her want it. I leaned back slightly, creating space between us, watching the confusion play across her face. I should get going, I said casually, though I left just enough tension in the air to keep her on edge. Sophia blinked, as if waking from a dream. Yeah, maybe that's a good idea, she murmured. I stood, placing my glass on the coffee table with deliberate slowness. We'll talk soon, I said, offering a smile full of secrets and promises unspoken. And remember, I'm here for you. As I stepped out of her house, I could feel her gaze lingering on my back. The weight of our conversation hung in the air, thick and undeniable. She was on the edge now, torn between loyalty and temptation. All she needed was a gentle nudge, and I would be right there to catch her when she fell. By the time I reached my car, the rain had let up, leaving the air cool and damp. I paused for a moment, savoring the sense of control. The first phase of my plan had gone perfectly. Ryan had taken my wife, Emily, my life. But he had no idea that I was orchestrating the same fate for him. Only this time, I would be more patient, more precise. When everything was said and done, Ryan wouldn't just lose Sophia. He'd lose everything. For now, though, I was content to wait, to let the tension simmer, and to let the betrayal build until it was ready to erupt. The next few days passed in a kind of uneasy stillness that had become my new reality. Emily continued her act, sending sweet but empty texts, pretending to be the devoted wife while sneaking off to meet Ryan. They were getting sloppy, probably convinced they were too smart for me to figure out what they were up to. Watching her go about her day, completely unaware of the cracks in her world, almost made me want to laugh. But I could feel those cracks growing. It wouldn't be long before the illusion of her perfect life would come apart. But for now, I kept up the facade, letting her believe I hadn't caught on. In fact, I began paying her more attention, giving her compliments, planning spontaneous dates, being the loving husband she thought I was. If she noticed any change in my behavior, she didn't say anything. She was probably too wrapped up in her own deceit to notice the game I was playing. It was the perfect cover, keeping her disoriented. But Sophia, she was my real target now. Since that night in her living room, I had seen the shift in her. She had started reaching out more, confiding in me, letting me in on her frustrations in a way that felt almost personal. Subtle at first, but each time, I pulled her further from Ryan, deepening the rift between them without him even realizing it. By the end of the week, I knew it was time to step things up. I'd been patient, not wanting to rush anything, but the moment was right. Ryan was leaving for a work conference. He had mentioned it in passing, proudly unaware of the perfect opportunity his absence would give me. On Friday evening, I sent Sophia a simple message. Nothing too forward, just a, "How are you holding up? Could you use some company?" Her reply came quickly. She was home alone and definitely needed the distraction. No hesitation on my part. The drive over was fast, but my pulse was racing. The rain had stopped, and the streets gleamed, slick with the remnants of the storm. The air smelled cool, damp, and thick with something else. Anticipation. Tonight, I would move things forward. When I arrived, Sophia greeted me with a tired smile. "Thanks for coming," she said quietly, stepping aside to let me in. "It's been a long week." I could see the weariness in her eyes, the exhaustion that seemed to drag her down. Ryan's indifference had taken its toll. She looked like someone who had been carrying a weight for too long. This was exactly what I had been hoping for. "I'm always here for you," I replied, offering her the same smile that had become second nature. We sat down in the living room, the dim lighting creating a calm, intimate atmosphere. Sophia poured us both a glass of wine. The act seemed innocent, but in the quiet of the room, it felt charged. I sat close enough to her for her to feel my presence, but not too close, at least not yet. At first, we spoke about the usual things, work, the kids, the little details that filled her life. But as the wine flowed, the conversation took a different turn. I could feel her defenses crumbling, the cracks in her resolve opening wider. I don't know how much longer I can pretend," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Ryan is never here, and when he is, it's like he's a stranger. I feel like I'm losing him." She paused, her eyes filled with uncertainty. "Or maybe I've already lost him." Her words hung in the air, heavy and loaded. This was the moment I had been waiting for, the opening I needed to slip inside. I reached out and gently placed my hand over hers. My touch was soft, but it carried intent. "You haven't lost him, Sophia," I said quietly, my voice calm. "But maybe it's time to let go of what's not working anymore. You deserve more than being invisible in your own marriage." She looked up at me, her eyes searching mine, as if looking for something. "I don't know what to do," she admitted, her voice trembling. "I've tried everything to make it work, but I feel so alone." "You're not alone," I said, keeping my tone steady and reassuring. "I'm here. I've always been here." Without saying a word, she leaned in. Her lips brushed against mine, tentative at first, as if testing something she wasn't sure she was ready for. I kissed her back, feeling the moment stretch just long enough before pulling away, my breath even, calm, as if this was exactly how things were meant to happen. Her eyes widened, and she pulled back instinctively, covering her mouth with her hand. "I shouldn't have done that," she stammered, her voice full of regret. "I'm sorry." I shook my head gently. "Don't apologize. You did nothing wrong." She looked at me, confusion and guilt flickering in her eyes. "But what about Ryan?" she asked, her voice thick with doubt. "Ryan isn't here," I said, finishing her thought. "And if he were, would you even feel this right now?" Her silence spoke volumes. She knew she had crossed a line, but deep down, she didn't regret it. Not really. She was torn between guilt and the relief of finally feeling something real again. "I don't know what I'm doing," she whispered, tears welling up in her eyes. "I feel so lost." I took her hand in mine, giving it a reassuring squeeze. "You're not lost. You're just beginning to see things clearly. The truth is right in front of you." The silence stretched between us, heavy with unspoken truths. Sophia was standing at a crossroads, caught between the life she had known and the possibility of something different, something new. And I was there, ready to help her take that step. This time, when she leaned in, there was no hesitation. Her kiss was desperate, urgent, as if she had been holding back for far too long. I wrapped my arms around her, pulling her close, feeling her warmth, the weight of the choices we were both making. In that moment, neither of us was thinking about Ryan. I wasn't thinking about Emily. We were just two people, caught in a moment that had been building for a long time. Sophia pulled away, her breath quick, her eyes conflicted. "I don't know if we should," she started, but I stopped her with another kiss. Slow, purposeful, giving her the comfort of my touch. "We're already here, Sophia." Her hesitation faded as she kissed me back, this time deeper. I could feel her walls crumble as she let herself go, completely lost in the moment. We moved together in perfect sync, no rush, but both knowing what was coming. As my lips brushed her neck, I felt her body press closer to mine, her breath catching in her throat. My hands slid under her shirt, tracing the soft curve of her back. When we finally reached the bedroom, the tension between us snapped, giving way to something that had been building for too long. An unspoken understanding lingered. Any lingering doubts or guilt were swept away. The hours that followed were a blur of stolen moments and whispered words. We explored each other, familiar, yet off limits. We took our time, savoring each touch, each lingering caress. But as the night wore on, restraint gave way to something stronger, and we let ourselves go entirely, leaving nothing unsaid or undone. When it was over, we lay in the stillness, the room shrouded in darkness, except for the soft sound of our breathing slowly returning to normal. Sophia rested her head on my chest, her fingers tracing idle patterns on my arm. "I never thought I'd do something like this," she whispered, her voice thick with exhaustion but also relief. I didn't respond. I just held her, my fingers weaving through her hair as I stared at the ceiling. I could feel the shift in her, the way she had crossed a line she could never uncross, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. Sophia had been lost in her marriage for so long, and now she was with me. As she drifted off to sleep, I felt that familiar satisfaction again. But this wasn't about what we'd just done. That was inevitable. This was about control. About turning the tables on Ryan in a way he never saw coming. What made it all the sweeter was that Sophia had no idea this was part of a bigger plan. This wasn't just a fleeting connection. It was the result of neglect and loneliness. In the weeks that followed, things took a darker turn. I kept the momentum going, carefully manipulating both Emily and Ryan while keeping my bond with Sophia a secret. She was mine now, completely drawn in, and with every text, every touch, I pulled her further into my world. 3 weeks later, we found ourselves at another dinner party. It was small, casual, the kind of evening that once would have felt normal. But nothing was normal anymore, not after what had happened between us. Ryan and Emily were there, as always, pretending their affair was some secret no one could see through. They laughed with our friends, pretending everything was fine, but it was all an act. Tonight wasn't about them. It was about Sophia. As the party buzzed around us, I stayed close to Sophia, making sure no one caught on to the new dynamic between us. It wasn't long before Sophia pulled me aside. She looked pale, her eyes wide, filled with something I couldn't quite place. Fear, maybe something deeper. I followed her into the kitchen, away from the others, as the door shut behind us, the noise of the party fading. She turned to face me, her hands trembling as she nervously twisted the hem of her sleeve. "What's going on?" I asked, my voice low. There was something off, a tension in the air. She took a deep breath, her lips quivering as she finally met my gaze. I don't know how to say this," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Just say it," I urged, stepping closer. My mind raced with possibilities. Her anxiety was palpable, her chest rising and falling as she struggled to speak. Then, finally, the words came out. "I'm pregnant," she said, the words hanging in the air like a bomb, leaving me speechless. My mind struggled to process this revelation, and it hit me like a punch to the gut. Pregnant. And it wasn't Ryan's child. Are you sure? I asked, my voice shaky, scanning her face for any sign that this might not be real. She nodded, biting her lip, her eyes filling with tears. I've taken all the tests. It's real. A heavy silence followed as we both absorbed what this meant. She was carrying my child, conceived in the midst of all this mess. Ryan had no idea that the woman he thought was his would soon have a child that wasn't his. What about Ryan? I asked carefully, my voice steady but with a tightness I couldn't hide. No, she whispered, shaking her head. He doesn't know anything. I haven't told him yet. I don't want to hurt him. I cut her off. He's been hurting you for years, Sophia. He deserves to know the truth. You deserve to be free of him. Tears rolled down her cheeks as she shook her head. I can't tell him. I don't know how he'll react. I stepped closer, placing my hands on her shoulders, making her meet my eyes. Listen to me. This is our chance. He's not what you need anymore. You know that. He's neglected you, taken you for granted while you've dealt with everything alone. But you're not alone now. You have me, I added softly. She looked up at me, her face softening as my words began to sink in. I don't know if I can do this, she whispered. You can, I replied firmly. You don't have to do this alone. You don't owe him anything. She hesitated, tears still falling, but I saw a shift in her, a realization that things were changing, and she couldn't stop it. I'm scared, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. I cupped her face in my hands, wiping away her tears with my thumb. You don't have to be scared. I'm here. We'll face this together. We stood there, the weight of the situation settling in as the sounds of the party continued outside the kitchen door. Sophia was pregnant with my child, and Ryan had no clue. The irony of it all hit me hard. He had stolen my wife, and now I had taken something far more valuable from him. We couldn't keep this secret forever, but for now, we would. Soon enough, the truth would come out, and when it did, it would tear everything apart. That's exactly what I wanted. I needed Ryan to feel the full weight of his actions, to watch his life fall apart in ways he couldn't imagine. Sophia took a steadying breath, her hands resting protectively on her stomach, a clear sign that she understood what was at stake. We'll figure it out, I reassured her. She nodded, her resolve strengthening as she wiped away her last tears. Okay. We both knew there was no going back now. Everything had changed, and soon, everyone would know. But for now, we'd keep this secret just a little longer, building the tension until it couldn't be contained. As we returned to the party, Ryan's laughter filled the room, and Emily's smile shone brightly beside him. They had no idea that their little world was about to crumble. In a few months, everything they had built would be destroyed. I caught Sophia's gaze as she glanced at Ryan, then back at me. Fear flickered in her eyes, but so did something darker. This wasn't just about betrayal anymore. It was about what was coming for all of us. The truth would come out, and when it did, the devastation would be impossible to ignore. And when that moment arrived, I'd be standing right there, watching everything they loved burn to the ground. Stay tuned, because this story is far from over. The next chapter will make this one look like nothing.